What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for Arrow Season 7, Episode 11, titled Past Sins. So this episode continues where Episode 10 left off, although it doesn't start that way. There is a scene with Oliver talking to Emiko, and I definitely expected that whole storyline to be a bigger part of this episode. It isn't really. It's in the beginning and at the end, and that is it, which I don't mind. I do think that this episode, what Oliver was in, was pretty good. I'll obviously get to that, but I did definitely expect there to be more of Oliver talking to Emiko, and honestly, I kind of like the fact that there wasn't much conflict between the two. There was the scene at the beginning where Emiko didn't want to have anything to do with Oliver whatsoever, but at the end of the episode, she considers talking to him, so I'm hoping that this goes a lot smoother than most, drama on this show does, and Emiko and Oliver don't really have much conflict going forward, and that's obviously shown in this episode as well, with Emiko really having a problem with Robert, not with Oliver, and in this episode, Oliver proves that he is not like his father, so hopefully after that, there is no more conflict between the two. So I did like how they used Emiko and Oliver in this episode, or at least like them meeting each other for the first time, and with that going forward into the next episodes of the season. But Oliver was a part of another storyline in this episode when he was being interviewed by that guy on TV, and then that guy was kidnapped, and then the person who kidnapped him said the same thing that the psychiatrist said to Oliver, and I really liked how they put all those things together, like how Oliver saw that and then put it all together, like how he came to the conclusion that it is somehow connected to David Hackett and how it is somehow connected to Robert killing David. That's basically like a theme in the season right now, which is that Robert Queen was a terrible person, and Oliver needs to prove that he is not like Robert, and I do actually really like that. I do like that the whole storyline in this season, and it is definitely done well in this episode as well. It is revealed to be Sam Hackett, the guy who has these electricity, not really powers, but this gadget that gives him electricity powers, which definitely sounds very comic booky. Like, this whole episode is very comic booky. You even have Green Arrow shooting an arrow with a net coming out of it, which is extremely comic booky, and I love that about this episode. I don't think the show should do it every single episode, but it does definitely work for this specific episode. The whole storyline with Sam Hackett was technically a filler storyline. Like, it was only really there to show Emiko that Oliver is not like his father, but I do think it worked nonetheless. It felt like a one-off issue of a comic book, and I thought they handled it incredibly well. Again, I loved how they brought back that whole storyline from the first episode of the show, because nobody ever thought that they would bring that back. Like, it was just somebody that Robert killed, not really anything to that at all. But now, 7 seasons later, and 12 years after that actually happened, they are bringing it back, which I really love how they're doing that, and somehow they did that with a villain of the week. I mean, they could have definitely made this guy, or the son of David Hackett, a villain of the entire season, getting revenge on Oliver for the death of his father, which would be similar to Prometheus, which would be possible nonetheless, and instead they made him a villain of the week, which makes him a great villain of the week because he has such great motivation. I do think that Arrow does villains of the week a little better than The Flash, mainly because they just don't do it as often. Flash, basically every other episode has a villain of the week, and it gets very tiring after a certain point. On Arrow, most of the time there is not a villain of the week, and this episode had one, and they gave him such a great motivation. I don't think the actor did an incredible job in the role, and I think that his powers were very over the top, or his abilities or his gadgets or whatever, very over the top with the electricity, but his motivation definitely speaks for itself and makes up for all that. His motivation is just so good, especially for a villain of the week, and I loved how they brought all of that back. In the end, for this storyline, I do think that they handled it incredibly well. Just the premise alone of just a villain of the week having such a strong motivation, connecting to the show itself, connecting to the main hero, and connecting to the first episode of the show, which happened more than 7 years ago, or more than 6 years ago, whatever. I just loved how they did that, and I don't think it was executed incredibly well, because like I said, the actor wasn't great in the role of the villain of the week, but it was definitely executed pretty well, and just the premise alone, with a pretty great execution, makes for a great storyline in this episode, even connecting to the whole storyline with Emiko, and making it so that Oliver and her might not have that much conflict going forward, which I definitely don't think they should. So the episode did begin with that interview with Oliver and Laurel, but that's split into two different storylines, one of them with Oliver, which I already mentioned, and another one with Laurel, which is what I'm going to go over right now. This episode was supposed to have an origin story for Laurel, like the showrunner said we will see Laurel's Earth 2 backstory, or I'm pretty sure she just said we will see more of Laurel on Earth 2, which we did technically, but we really only got one scene with Laurel on Earth 2, and that was the scene where she killed that other guy, which didn't look different. I mean, where she was, it just looked like any place in Star City. It didn't really look like Earth 2, which sucks because we've never actually seen Star City on Earth 2, I don't think, and that would have been a cool thing to see. We haven't seen Earth 2 in a while either, so it would have just been cool to see. Nevertheless, it was actually a pretty great storyline, Felicity and all. I didn't mind Felicity in the storyline at all, probably because she was mostly separated from Oliver, which is when I think Oliver and Felicity are at their best. This season in general, Felicity has been mostly separated from Oliver, which I do definitely appreciate. I do appreciate Oliver being separated from Felicity a little bit more than Felicity being separated from Oliver, but I also think that Felicity is made a better character when she's separated from Oliver as well in a storyline like this, for instance. But this storyline I do think was a pretty great look at Laurel as a character. In fact, I never loved Laurel, this version of Laurel, as a character until this episode. After this episode, I think Laurel has become a much more three-dimensional character, especially from that one scene where she describes that event when she was 13 years old on her birthday, or I think it was her birthday, where she inadvertently caused the death of her father, and how that connected to her wanting to go after this guy who she thought she killed back on Earth 2, but this is the Earth 1 version. Forget all of that. I think this scene was a great scene. It was kind of emotional as well. Now, I get why they didn't show the actual scene. They would have had to get a 13-year-old actress and bring back Paul Blackthorne. I'm kind of glad they didn't do that whole thing because, again, it would have been very difficult to do, and it would have probably not have been as good as it was in this scene. I love this scene, and I do think that it made Laurel a much better character than she was before this scene. This whole episode made Laurel a better character, and I do like her a lot after this episode, way more than I did before. But in this same storyline, we see that somebody is going after or stalking, I guess, Black Siren, which she thinks is the guy that she killed back on Earth 2, which I do like how they do that misdirect where we think it's this guy, turns out it is somebody else that we don't even know who it is. I'm guessing we're going to be revealed who it is in episode 12, which is why I feel like these two episodes are kind of like two-parters with the interview and this guy, this TV producer or this reporter or whatever he is, as well as this whole storyline with somebody going after Black Siren as well as Black Canary. Either this person is going after just the Canaries or they're going after vigilantes in general. I'm guessing Canary just because they really emphasize Black Canary and Black Siren. I don't know who this is, but we will see in the future episodes of this season as well. So obviously that is not it for this episode review. There is a completely separate storyline, and that is the Ghost Initiative Protocol, which is for all intents and purposes a new Suicide Squad with Cupid, China White, Joe Wilson, and probably the leader of that group, Ricardo Diaz. Now, they're not calling it the Suicide Squad because they're limited by what Warner Brothers is allowing them to do, but I'm not limited by Warner Brothers in this sense, so I'm just going to call them the Suicide Squad. There's absolutely no reason for me to not call them the Suicide Squad because they are, for all intensive purposes, the Suicide Squad. But this storyline consisted of Joe Wilson, Ricardo Diaz, China White, and Cupid, but obviously mainly focused around Curtis and Ricardo Diaz, with Curtis having a problem with the Suicide Squad, which was fine. I didn't love that part, that aspect of the storyline. Curtis having a problem with putting bombs in the necks of criminals. I really hope that really doesn't continue. Obviously, it's morally ambiguous. It's not like something that's good or necessarily bad either. It's probably, it's definitely illegal to do that, but I really hope we don't have more of that conflict with Curtis because that's not something I liked in this episode, although it probably will continue going forward. But this episode did something that Arrow's never really done before, which is something that has been done before in movies and TV shows, which is we see a character doing something and doing this whole thing, and they really get far in what they're doing, but then it all turns out to be a virtual reality or just some sort of thing that never actually happened, or a dream or something. This time around it is a virtual reality, and that was the twist at the end of this storyline. Now, this twist was handled pretty well for the most part, with the whole thing of the Suicide Squad being sedated so that bombs could be put in their necks, but Diaz resists the drugs and he escapes, being actually powered by the drugs, and then because of that he's able to escape, then actually killing Curtis, then contacting the probably ninth circle, and then it turns out he's in a virtual reality. Now I do think that it worked for a little bit. Like, I do think that in the beginning of this whole thing, I did think that it was real life. I didn't know it was going to be a virtual reality, but once Curtis showed up in the parking lot with a weapon and saying that I came prepared, he didn't really have much of anything. If it came with his T-spheres or it came with a bunch of other Argus agents, then it would have been believable. But once this happened, I thought there must be something off here, and then Curtis died, and I thought that this is obviously not real life, because I even saw promotional photos from the next episode which had Mr. Terrific in it, not just Curtis, but Mr. Terrific. So obviously Curtis is not dead, so then that twist was kind of spoiled, and in the end of the episode when it was revealed, or the next scene really, it didn't really hit as hard. It still was a pretty good twist, and I didn't see it coming for the beginning of it, but in the end it was a little bit predictable, and I did see it coming. Nevertheless, again, it is something they've never done before. It's something original, and I do like that they're trying new things. In conclusion, after 2 episodes of Arrow, which is episode 8 and 10, of not really living up to the quality of the first 7 episodes of the season with the Slab Side storyline, I do think this episode was a great return to form from those episodes with 3 pretty great storylines. Oliver and the Hackett storyline was just such a great premise for a standalone episode, and it was handled very, very well. Laurel became a great character after this episode, in my opinion, and the Suicide Squad coming together was pretty cool to see, and the twist at the end, although it could have been handled a little bit better, it was pretty good nonetheless. I do think David Ramsey, who plays John Diggle, did a great job directing this episode, and I will give it a 9.3 out of 10. But let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments, as well as in the poll in the top right corner of the video. And if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to see more reviews for Arrow Season 7, there will be a link in the top right corner of the video as well. And as always, thanks for watching.